Our theme for worship this month at Tapestry is truth. In one sense, it's very simple. Tell the truth and life will turn out a lot better. While that's true, life isn't always so black and white. Most of the time, we wade through a fog of truthiness, half-truths, fake news, and well-intended white lies. Truth gets pretty complicated. Today, I want to offer you a framework of 4 different ways of thinking about truth, or 4 different paths, I'm calling them. The first path is trying to understand the world around us. How does it work? What's it made of? What happens if we add some energy or a different chemical? How are these things connected? And what's out there beyond what we can see? What goes on in the tiny world of microorganisms and cells and subatomic particles? Without applying any judgment or any other layer of meaning, we work through the scientific method to understand our world. And we figured out a lot of what makes our universe tick. It's easy to feel very proud of ourselves, but any scientist will tell you that there remain innumerable mysteries. Sometimes we don't even know what question to ask next. Are we looking for the right things on Mars, for example? Or will we be totally surprised when we get there? The first path of truth is probably the most straightforward, but it's not simple. It requires a huge amount of humility. Carl Sagan, the scientist, says, "In science, it often happens that scientists say, 'You know, that's a really good argument. My position is mistaken.' And then they would actually change their minds. They really do it. I cannot recall the last time something like that happened in politics or religion." Now, Carl Sagan points a bit of a rosy picture of how science operates. I do think it's fair to say that scientists are more invested in evidence than many politicians or religious leaders. And even though scientists try to look at things objectively, our own assumptions and biases get in the way. Sometimes the result is bad information. Sometimes results are reinforcing deep-seated social biases. It's so easy to forget that for decades, science was used to reinforce racism, sexism, and homophobia. Science was a tool for bigotry until relatively recently. It's also created terrifying weapons and an environmental crisis. Under ideal circumstances, skilled, objective scientists can tell us a huge amount about the physical world. It's not perfect, though. The second path of truth is less about the material world and more about our values and beliefs. A framework of stories and metaphors, values and faith give a foundation for each of our lives. We carry complex sets of different values that weave together a structure of what we feel is true. Every Sunday, as part of our unison affirmation, we say that this is part of our covenant, to seek truth in love. We use compassion as a foundation, or maybe better, a filter through which to process information. We seek truth in love. Now, sometimes these moral or ethical truths are so deeply embedded in us that we don't even recognize them. That's part of what we do as a religious community, to discern those unspoken beliefs. My job isn't to indoctrinate you. It's to help us all consider what we believe. A lot of that is similar, but I also hope every once in a while you leave worship thinking, huh? No way. I don't agree with that at all. And when you do that, you have a better sense of your own beliefs. Now, sorting out these first two paths, science and ethics, I think is a great tool for sorting through the flow of news and information that comes at us. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a sense that what is being said in a news report or in a speech just seems untrue. In those moments, we have to ask the question, is it the scientific information that's untrue? Is data being manipulated? Or is the ethical grounding off base? Is it morally wrong? It's easy to say, that's not right, he's a liar. I want to invite you to go one step further to identify what in particular is not right. Is it the data or the moral grounding? Or maybe both? The third path of truth is accepting and celebrating that this is a never-ending quest. There will always be more to learn. In theological terms, we call it ongoing revelation. And it's a huge piece of our liberal faith tradition. Some religious traditions understand truth as something that God delivered in a particular time to a particular person that's probably recorded in one particular book. This debate about the Bible and our use of history and science is a big part of what helped Unitarians identify themselves in the 17 and 1800s. We believe that truth didn't stop 2,000 years ago. Every day we have an opportunity to learn more about the sacred. And closer to home, we develop more complicated truths over the course of our lifetime. The truths of childhood are not adequate to navigate the challenges of adulthood. And some of what was true for us when we were in our 20s, I am told, will not be true for us in our 70s. The journey does not end. The fourth path is truth-telling. Telling it to others and telling it to ourselves. We've been told our entire lives to tell the truth, but we've also learned that lying pays off big benefits. Pamela Myers writes, "The more intelligent the species, the more likely it is to be deceptive. It starts really early. Babies will fake cry. 1-year-olds learn concealment. 5-year-olds lie outright, and they manipulate via flattery. By the time we enter the working world, life is cluttered with spam, fake digital friends, partisan politics, ingenious identity thieves." She calls it a deception epidemic. To me, this innate ability or drive toward concealing the truth was a little bit of a relief. It makes me feel a little bit better about our ability to lie to ourselves. I don't know if this happens to you, but every once in a while, I get the disturbing wake-up call from my friends when they seem to know me and my motivations better than I know myself. Truth-telling is not for the faint of heart. Cultivating loving honesty can be a powerful spiritual journey of a lifetime. So those are the four paths: science, ethics, learning, and truth-telling. They appear pretty easy at first glance, but they're each challenging in their own way. And I like to think of them as a muscle, a habit that we can develop. So last week, I stumbled onto a Netflix documentary that explores truth in some compelling ways. It's worth checking out. It's called Behind the Curve. It's a documentary about the flat earth movement. These are people who believe that the earth is flat. like a board, and that it's at the center of the universe. Apparently, this belief is actually growing significantly, thanks to social media. The documentary follows a couple of the leaders of this movement, and it goes to the first ever Flat Earth Convention. And you also get a good number of theories that explain how they justify this belief. For the first quarter of the movie, I thought, well, this is a big waste of time. But it got a lot more interesting. Along with the Flat Earth folks, you get interviews with astrophysicists and psychologists. Together, they help unpack how and why Flat Earth adherents maintain their very odd beliefs. One of the biggest pieces is confirmation bias. When we have an idea that something is true, we are dramatically more drawn toward information that confirms our pre-existing belief. Even when faced with a mountain of evidence from reputable sources that refute what we believe, we'll often cling to a weak argument from an unqualified source. You may have noticed I changed from talking about those flat earth people to we human beings. We're all influenced by confirmation bias. And with the infinite flow of information and misinformation available on the internet, it's very, very easy to find theories or even evidence that support what we already believe. Please hear me. I am not saying that I believe there is a shred of truth to this flat earth theory. And I'm not saying that all truth is relative or people should believe whatever they want. But when we start criticizing folks for their fringe beliefs, it's helpful to know that we can sometimes fall prey to the same psychological traps. The other little journey that they follow for the flat earth community is closer to home. The documentary explains the sense of purpose and meaning that these folks find when they stand as a strong minority opinion. There's a sense of righteousness when resisting the mainstream. And as one holds a minority opinion, they gravitate toward others who share a similar belief. A community develops, and often relationships they had before fade into the background. The end result is social insulation, in which we communicate and trust only those people who share a particular belief. We all want and sometimes need to be around people who understand us, whether that's a flat earth convention or the annual meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I told you it was closer to home. Now, the third psychological phenomenon in this movie of flat earthers is the bending of information to conform to a single anchor idea. And this was pretty shocking to watch unfold. To hold on to a belief that the earth is flat, you have to believe that the entire scientific community, the entire federal government, and pretty much every other institution is part of a tremendous conspiracy to hide the truth. And once you believe that these institutions are actively deceiving the entire world, you open up Pandora's box of conspiracies. For flat earth adherents, that distrust manifests in a wide range of conspiracy theories about vaccines and chemtrails and global warming, moon landings, September 11th inside jobs, assassinations, you name it. They ate up conspiracies like Cheetos. They're not the only ones that go down the rabbit hole of mistrust, though. Our government has done some awful things, and I don't suggest blind trust in any institution. But if we abandon any sense of anchor, if we fundamentally distrust our wider human community in the search for truth, we're set adrift and can be persuaded to believe anything. Suggesting that anyone is intentionally lying, especially on a large scale, is serious business. Now, exploring all these psychological traps and our shared ability to be sucked into mistruth all leads to a final conclusion in the film. The psychologists and the astrophysicists together explain that shaming people for what they believe is not going to create change. Shame encourages people to hunker down deeper into their self-righteous minority opinion. Shame keeps people in their social silos. Shame shuts down any remaining ability to process new data. To engage with others, we have to hold on to both our scientific truth and our moral truth. We have to offer information with compassion. Flat Earth theory is perhaps a laughable example of mistruth. It's harder to laugh at those who deny climate change or espouse sexist or white supremacist beliefs. On Friday, a few of us had a chance to hear Christian Picciolini speak. You may have heard of this guy. As a youth, Christian was a skinhead. He got recruited in his younger years because he didn't have a lot of good things to do with his time. But through some grace and compassion, he was able to see his way out of that mess. Christian has spent the last couple of decades helping others with compassionate truth-telling, not shaming. He's helped over 300 people leave hate organizations, including skinheads and members of ISIS. I told you, this journey of truth is not for the faint of heart, but it has tremendous power. We're called to seek and to speak the truth in love. And I'm glad we have one another to help keep us focused on a very, very narrow path. Amen.